The quiet man. John lived alone in a small, quiet town. People knew little about him. He was a recluse, a man of shadows, always seen alone, always silent. Some said he was a writer, others a painter. No one knew for sure, but there was an unsettling aura around him, a quiet dread that made people avoid him. One foggy morning, John's door creaked open. A young woman, Emily, stood there, her face pale and drawn. Lost, she explained. She had been driving when the fog thickened, and she'd missed a turn. John, with a nod, invited her in. Emily was drawn to John's house. It was old, filled with strange objects and an odd, musty smell. Yet, there was a warmth to it, a homely feel that soothed her. Days turned into weeks as the fog persisted. Emily, unable to find her way back, stayed. As days passed, Emily noticed strange things. Shadows seemed to dance in the corner of her eyes, whispers echoed in the silent house, and at night, she'd wake up to the sound of footsteps pacing outside her door. John seemed oblivious to these disturbances. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Emily asked about the house. John's eyes, usually dull, sparked with an eerie light. He spoke of the house not as a building but as a living entity, a being that chose its inhabitants, that fed on their fears. Fear gnawed at Emily. She started seeing things, or perhaps imagining them. Faces in the wallpaper, eyes in the shadows. The house seemed to close in around her, its walls whispering secrets. John, far from being a comforting presence, became a looming shadow, his silence more terrifying than any scream. Then came the nightmares, vivid, terrifying dreams that bled into reality. She'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, the house seeming to close in on her. John would be there, his eyes filled with a strange, knowing look. Emily realized she was trapped. Trapped in a house, trapped in her mind, and trapped in a growing madness. The line between reality and illusion blurred, and she couldn't tell what was real anymore. One night, as a particularly terrifying dream ended, Emily found herself standing in the hallway. The house was silent, too silent. A cold dread washed over her. She called out for John, but there was no answer. A door at the end of the hallway creaked open. Light spilled out, casting eerie shadows. With trembling steps, Emily walked towards it. The room was filled with books, paintings, and strange objects. At the center, a large canvas stood, covered with a black cloth. A cold hand touched her shoulder. She whirled around, expecting to see John. Instead, she saw her own reflection, distorted and terrifying. The eyes in the reflection were not hers. They were black, empty, and filled with a cold, inhuman intelligence. A scream tore from her throat as the reflection reached out, its hand passing through her own. She felt a cold emptiness spreading through her body, a numbing sensation that crept up her spine. The last thing Emily saw was the black cloth falling from the canvas, revealing a painting of herself, but with the same black, empty eyes. And then darkness. The house stood silent, the only sound the ticking of an old grandfather clock. John walked into the room, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He looked at the painting, then at the empty space where Emily had stood. "Another one," he whispered, his voice carrying a strange echo in the silent house. Outside, the fog rolled in, thick and impenetrable. The house on the hill stood alone, a dark silhouette against the ghostly white. And within its walls, a sinister game continued, a game as old as the house itself, a game where the only winner was the house. The disappearance of Emily sent shockwaves through the quiet town. People talked in hushed tones about the eerie house on the hill. Some said they had seen shadows moving behind the windows. Others claimed to hear mournful wails in the dead of night. The local police, despite their skepticism, felt a creeping unease as they investigated the house. Inside, the house seemed to have reverted to its original state. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. It was as if Emily had simply vanished into thin air. The only anomaly was the painting in the attic, a chilling portrait of Emily with those vacant, black eyes. Detective Harris, the lead investigator, was a man of science, not superstition. Yet, as he stood in that room, a chill ran down his spine. There was something profoundly unsettling about the painting, something that seemed to draw him in and repel him at the same time. Days turned into weeks, and the case went cold. But Detective Harris couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than met the eye. He started having strange dreams, dreams of the house on the hill, of shadows and whispers, of Emily's terrified face. He decided to spend a night in the house, a decision that his colleagues warned him against. Armed with a flashlight and a recorder, he entered the house. The moment he stepped inside, a cold draft swept through the room, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. As the night wore on, the house seemed to come alive. Strange noises echoed through the corridors. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision. He heard whispers, soft at first, then growing louder, filling the house with an eerie cacophony. Then he saw it. A figure, translucent and ethereal, stood at the foot of the stairs. It was Emily, or at least a ghostly resemblance of her. Her eyes, the same vacant black, stared into his soul. A scream built in his throat, but no sound escaped his lips. He tried to move, to flee, but his body refused to obey. He was frozen in terror, a helpless spectator to his own nightmare. Then the figure began to move towards him, its translucent form shimmering in the dim light. Detective Harris woke with a start, drenched in sweat. The house was silent, the morning sun streaming through the windows. It was a dream, he told himself, a product of a tired mind. But as he looked around the room, he saw it. A small, black stain on the wall, shaped like a hand. Fear gnawed at him. He had to get out of there. He packed his belongings and left the house, never to return. But the house on the hill continued to cast a long shadow over the town. People avoided it, their fear growing with each passing day. Years later, the house was demolished. But the stories persisted, whispered in hushed tones around campfires. A chilling tale of a house that was more than just bricks and mortar. They said that on foggy nights, you can still see the shadows of the house, and if you listen carefully, you can hear the faint whisper of a name lost to time, a name that echoes through the darkness. Emily, or whatever she had become, was just one victim of the house. There were others, they said, people who had disappeared without a trace, their souls trapped within the house's sinister embrace. The house on the hill was a place of shadows, a place where sanity went to die, a place where fear was the only constant.